Most eight-figure CEOs over the last 30 years have been older because you've traditionally had to be in the industry a while to get your company to that size. Now we live in this world where 22, 23-year-olds are spinning up eight-figure businesses in their bedroom, in a dorm room.
The turning point for me was about 16 years ago. I think it was maybe January, February. I'm sitting at my desk and my heart is literally pounding in my chest. I mean, so in that moment I go, I'm going to have a heart attack.
Be very intentional about who you pick. Look at all of these external factors, not just the front page of how much money they make, what business they built. They have to be aligned with what you're aligned. If not, you won't see success in that mentorship.
The reason you're experiencing that stress is because you don't understand what your unique personal drivers are, and you're not caring for all of those.
What is some advice you can give to those entrepreneurs and founders that are listening to this? Like, holy shit, that's me. Like, I need to get out of this. Welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Wealth. I'm your host, Andres Sanchez, and today I have Paul Ryan. Paul is an eight-figure CEO and business owner. He is also the host of the Inner Entrepreneurial podcast. This is a really exciting conversation for me, not only because we can riff about business and what it's been like to start that eight-figure business, eight-figure portfolio of businesses, but also to talk a little bit on the podcast side and share a few notes, talk a little bit about the journey of being a podcaster, especially since we are both in a very similar space. I'm very excited about this conversation. I'm sure there's going to be tons of value for everybody that's here listening and watching with us. Paul, thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure, Andres, and thank me for inviting. Try again. Thank you for inviting me on your show. It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you for being here. And I know we're on like different parts of the world here. You're in Ireland. I'm in Miami. That's the beautiful part about the world that we live in right now and what technology allows us to do. I want to start with giving you the floor to just give us a quick intro on who Paul Ryan is and a few of your accolades before we start diving in.
Who Paul Ryan is, lots of things. I'm a little bit older than you, I think, so those things have changed over the years. I've gone through the phases of building a business decades ago, probably before you were born. Growing that business, working extraordinarily hard in that business. Then about 16, 17 years ago, becoming really burnt out, literally destroyed by what was a very successful business, but finding myself miserable. And going from that process through a whole period of personal reflection, learning about myself, learning about prioritizing my needs, but learning how to run a business in a way that gave me lots of free time and freedom to pursue the things I wanted to do as well. To a point now where I have a management team running both my businesses, and I leave the day to day to them, and I pursue two things out of interest more than anything else, because thankfully at this stage in my life I have the opportunity just to do what I want to do with my time. And what I choose to do, apart from travel and all those wonderful things, is what to occupy my headspace is I have a podcast called The Inner Entrepreneur. And it's very focused on the inner world of entrepreneurship. So I'm honestly not that interested in talking to people about the hows they do their business. That I've done that for decades, and it's just a little bit boring to me at this stage. But I'm interested in what's going on inside the entrepreneur, because many of the people I've spoken to on my own journey, it's an inner journey, which is why I called it The Inner Entrepreneur. Because when you meet to become successful in business, you go through a series of challenges. That's what everyone does. And when you find those challenges, the challenges are personal challenges. They may be business challenges, but it's how you deal with those challenges. And the people who are successful are the people who overcome those challenges. And that always is an inner story. And then the inner story evolves into then I, X, Y, Z, and that's the strategy. But the inner story is how they dealt with those challenges. So yeah, I created the podcast to explore that, firstly for myself, and to explore it with other entrepreneurs. And the moment I'm building a mastermind group for 7-8 figure entrepreneurs. called the 1 Hour CEO, and it's very much geared towards entrepreneurs, business owners who are in that space where they've built successful businesses, but now they're burnt out, they're overwhelmed. So what's the path to finding peace, fulfillment, happiness for yourself, and learning how to run your business in a way that nourishes you financially, but nourishes you emotionally, spiritually, fulfillment as well. So that's the quickest wrap up I can do for you, Andres.
No, thank you so much. And I'm really excited about this conversation now, even more because I just finished recording an episode with somebody who's in the mental health and therapy space. And they are talking about all of these new practices and trying to help people understand how their brain works, how they can find out what's actually going on inside and be a better person, and in turn be a better entrepreneur. Hey, I wanted to take a quick break from the episode you're currently watching to let you know about our newsletter. We write a newsletter twice a week to a community of over 13,000 CEOs and founders, highlighting the founders that we interview, the brands they're building, and how they're scaling and growing these companies. If you're a founder interested in blowing up your brand in 2025, check out the link below and subscribe to our free newsletter. Now, back to the episode. I think that is a great kind of place to start here with our conversation. I do want to talk about what you
Sure.
built and how you built it, but I'm very curious to hear your perspective on what you just mentioned. What are you seeing inside these entrepreneurs? What are some of the common kind of burnout? I forget what's the word I'm looking for. Some of these burnout symptoms that you see with these entrepreneurs, because our audience is all founders, entrepreneurs, and aspiring entrepreneurs. So I think anything that we say in this space will hit home very hard with them.
Well, the interesting thing to me, if I bring you back to that space, maybe 16-ish years ago. And so at the time, I have all those things that your aspiring entrepreneurs want, which I had a beautiful home. I drive a luxury SUV. My wife is at home looking after our family. We have time and resources for holidays. All of these things. So when you look at the outside, it's a very good life, and inside my family, it was a very, very good life. But the turning point for me was about 16 years ago. I think it was maybe January, February. I'm sitting at my desk, and my heart is literally pounding in my chest. I mean, so in that moment I go, I'm going to have a heart attack. These crazy ideas are going on in my head. I'm calculating the distance between the hospital and my office, and I'm working out in my mind if an ambulance will get there fast enough to save my life. So because my heart is literally jumping out of my chest, I think I'm going to have this heart attack. The heart attack doesn't come. I go and visit my local doctor, and I explain him, and that was an extreme moment, but I was having lots of this experience of pressure, which was like this relentless pounding heart and all this sort of stuff. And so go and speak to my doctor. He gives me a full medical, and he goes, Paul, you're in perfect health. You're in great shape. Your heart, there's no problem with your heart. And then he says to me, do you think it might be stress? Now, you're probably listening to this going, hello, obviously it's stress. But when you're in that, it's not obvious. And that's kind of the first thing I would say to anyone listening is when you're in that overwhelmed, stress position and you have all those symptoms. And for me, it was a heart problem, but it can be also obsessive thinking. So I was thinking about business all the time. I was irritable. I was on the treadmill all of the time. I was working very, very hard. But when you're in that space, you're not aware that, at least I wasn't aware that was a problem. And I remember leaving the doctor's office. I'm driving my car and I go, well, okay, I'm stressed. I'm mega stressed. I'm burnt out. I'm close to burning out. I'm going to crack. What I have to do now is I have to leave my business because my business is clearly the source of this stress. So in that drive, I made the decision I have to leave my business. The challenge was that my wife was at home with 3 young children, and my wife had a very good job, and we'd made it a family decision for her to leave that job and look after our family. And I'd taken responsibility. I was providing for the family, so it all seemed to make sense. And that seemed to make sense, the plan. And now I'm going, I have responsibility to provide for my family. They are my number one priority. But in doing that, I'm destroying myself. And what am I going to do? And I really was in it for a long time in this horrible dilemma going, I have to leave my business, but I need to provide for my family. This huge internal dilemma, which was really eating me up. And then the aha moment, the penny dropped, and I realized my business is not the problem. How I'm running my business is the problem. And I, like most entrepreneurs, like most founders, business owners, I am firefighting all day long. I'm the decision maker. I'm the key influencer. I am the main person in this business. And my description of it is, if you've ever stood in a tennis court with an automatic tennis ball machine and it's firing balls at you and you're continually trying to hit those balls. And that's what my life was, continually firefighting all day long. That sense of just issues coming at me all the time. And I was just burning out. So that was the realization, that the business actually wasn't the problem. It was how I engaged in the business was the problem. And I then had to learn how to run a business in a way that was sustainable. And I would describe that as, I needed to become an owner of the business and not the firefighter, not the operator. So I needed to learn, how do I, when people own businesses and they don't engage in them, how do I learn to own a business? Now, I know lots of people do that and it doesn't work for them. So how do you learn to own a business and have that business operate successfully, but you don't have to be on the floor 7 days a week firefighting, because that burns you out and you end up damaging relationships, damaging your health, your emotional, your physical, your mental health, and damaging your business.
Yeah, I want to talk through that time where you had to learn and what you did learn in that period, because it's crazy. I've had three conversations with eight-figure entrepreneurs in the last 2 weeks, and all, including you now, one of them had a full panic attack and had to go
Mm,
to the hospital. One
mm,
actually had to have open heart surgery because they one had a panic attack and then realized, wow, and this is somebody who is extremely healthy. They were like, you're
mm.
running yourself
Yeah,
into the ground with how
yeah,
hard
yeah,
you're working.
yeah,
So I think that there's got to be some listening right now that are in this position right now,
yeah,
feeling like they
yeah.
can't get out of the hamster wheel. What did you learn,
Mm.
and what is some advice you can give to those entrepreneurs and founders that are listening to this? Like, holy shit, that's me. Like, I need to get out of this.
And the first thing I would say is, it's extraordinarily common. Uh, and when you're the person standing in that deep amount of stress, you're looking at the other business owners, who seem very successful, have it all together, and you think, I'm in this mess. These people have it figured. Now I speak to a lot of business owners in that place, and it's extraordinarily common. And it's amazing when you get to what I call layer two. So you have a level one conversation with someone, and then when you drop to a deeper conversation with someone you perceive as being very successful, um, and you drop to a deeper level of conversation, you go, well, yeah, all that is true. I am very successful, but I'm hugely stressed. So that's the first thing I would say, is it's very, very common. Um, I built a whole mastermind program about around the transition, how you would get from the A to Z of getting out of this, which was a really interesting process for me, because what during that throughout that process, what I was guided to do was to start at stage one, and literally track my whole journey. Um, and I put that journey into three phases over many, many years. And the three phases I called clarity, strategy, and execution. Um, and what and everyone wants to go straight to strategy. In other words, how do I fix this? And the biggest part is actually clarity. And so if I'm working with people on we call the mastermind the 1 hour CEO. So if I'm working people in that, I will spend so much time in the clarity, because the clarity has a few things. The clarity starts at the very basic foundation with, who am I and what do I want? And we have a framework, we have a process called unique personal drivers, where we literally take people through a process of figuring out what are their unique drivers, because you have a very set of unique drivers. Andres and I have a unique set of drivers. But we skate through life without realizing what those drivers are, and we're not fulfilling them. You're an entrepreneur, you're successful. If you were fulfilling all of those drivers that you need, you wouldn't be experiencing distress. You would be fulfilled, you would be happy, you may be challenged, but it would be a positive challenge. The reason you're experiencing that stress is because you don't understand what your unique personal drivers are, and you're not caring for all of those. So the first thing to do for anyone is to get an understanding of what drives them. So take a step back away from everything and go, what's my drivers? What are unique drivers for me? Understanding those unique drivers allows you to create a thing I call the happiness formula, because these are the things that are important to me. I figured out four things. I'm talking about this quickly, but it took me a decade to get my head through all this. I figured out four things mattered to me: my family, um, my family, my personal well-being, which is mental, spiritual, emotional well-being; my personal development, which is growing, developing, learning, which is why I do things like the podcast and work with people, etc., and my personal wealth. And those four things were important to me. Um, Once I realized that those four things were what was important to me in my life, then I also began to realize that almost nothing else mattered to me in life. And I believe this is the case with almost every human being. And I've had this in many conversations. You can narrow it down to 3 to 6 things that really are important to you. And there's a million things in the world, as we know, outside of that, and very easily accessed online today. But none of those things are actually important to you. When I mean important to you, they're not going to turn the dial for you for meaning, fulfillment, and happiness. But there are, if I used to have this conversation with you, I would find there are 3, 4, 5 things that really matter to Andres, and that's what really turns the dial for meaning for you. But so it's not that complicated, except most people just go through life unaware, but they don't stop back and think about it. Once you get those clear, then you realize, and you go, well, Paul, how does this make any sense in relation to their business conversation? Because if you look at me, at this guy 20 years ago, all my effort was on building a business, growing wealth, because that's what I was raised to do. That's what entrepreneurs, isn't that what we do? We grow, we scale businesses, we pursue wealth. So I was pursuing effectively one of my four drivers. That was damaging all of the other three. So in other words, it wasn't giving me time for my wife, my family. Even when I was giving them time, it wasn't giving me presence with them because my head was with my family. It was seriously damaging my well-being because I didn't have time to take after it. It was damaging my mental health, my emotional health, obviously because of the stress. My physical health, I didn't have time to take care of myself. And my personal development, I wasn't growing as a human being. I was trapped in this area. I was growing in one area, but I wasn't nourishing the other three. What I was growing and why I was successful at it was number four. I was growing my wealth. I was growing in business, but it's not enough. I mean, if you have a chair with one leg, the chair falls over, and I was falling over. So there's four legs supporting my chair, and I need to support all. So the stepping back first brings you into a place of balance, because you understand I need time to address all of these things. And so it was a question of understanding what happiness and fulfillment looked like for me. Um, I, I then talk about what I call the seven core values, because there are core values common to all human beings, and you have to, when you're planning your life, you have to consider all of those values. So to skip through all of those, when someone has gone through all of those, and this is the path I took over many years, I went through all of these. So very clear picture of who I was, what I wanted as a human being. And when I had that clarity, then I began to look, well, what do I want as a business? Now, in that moment in the car, I wanted to leave my business. And then I thought, well, is there a way I can stay in my business and meet all of these needs also? And that required me to look at my business and to see what was wrong with my business. And I saw a couple of things wrong with my business. I saw that I had big cultural issues with my business, and there was the behavior of people in the business wasn't great. But I accepted that as the norm because that's how people behave. That was putting a lot of stress on me. And secondly, a lot of the people weren't what I would call A players. And so I did two things over a period of, I'm going to say a couple of years, because people want quick fixes. I didn't fix this quickly, and I don't think it can be fixed that quickly. I did two things. I did a radical cultural change in my business. So I really set a standard of how people behaved and engaged in the business. That was the first thing I did. A number of people in the business were not happy with that. So the next thing is the hire to fire. So I had to hire people who were a cultural fit for the business, who were at a higher skill level, and I had to fire people who were a poor cultural fit for the business. By the way, some of those people who had to be removed from the business were at a high skill level, so they're very competent, but they were culturally damaging to the business. So over a period of time, I transformed my business into a much more pleasant place to work, much more effective place to work, a place with a very high culture. And I transformed the team. So I had two things. I had a very good culture in the business, and I had a player in the business. Now, when people talk about A players, they're thinking of your Steve Jobs or something. I have guys packing boxes in our warehouse who I consider A players. Well, how can you consider a guy who pack? Because he does what he does exceptionally well. He doesn't want to be the CEO. He doesn't want to be the CEO of the business. That's not his aspiration. This is what he does. But he comes in, he enjoys that work. He's extremely competent at that work, and he does it very well. And he serves our internal teams, and he serves our customers very, very well. I consider him an A player in his role. So once I had that, I just began to build proper structures in my business, and began to slowly step away from the business. There are 6 or 7 steps of stepping away, and there's some responsibilities a CEO must always retain. So I know I'm throwing a lot of information at you here, I'm aware, but but the thing about it is it's a very doable process for any business owner if they have the right guidance. It's not, and it's simple, but it's not easy. It's complicated, and I mean, it'd be much easier for me to come in here and give you some, glib answers that were very quick fix. Quick fix often doesn't work that well,
Mm-hmm.
but there are processes where I believe almost any CEO business owner, if they're willing to do this. Now, I tend to only work with 7 and 8 figure CEOs, and the reason is because if your business is smaller than, say, 7 figures, probably smaller than maybe 3 to 5 million, uh, it may not be, you may not have the scale to put the structures in place, the people in place to allow you to step away from the business. And that's why I tend to uh, talk to the 7, 8 figure business owners. Have I answered the
And
question?
yeah, no, that was fantastic. And I appreciate you not giving the cookie cutter quick fixed answer, because I think anybody with a little bit of competency knows that living life and fixing problems band-aid to band-aid is just not the way to actually build success. And in just thinking through that, like I've heard plenty of stories like this where a CEO finally has that aha moment, like, wow, like the baby that I built, nurtured, and created is as a teenager now. It's ready to go off on its own life. I
Yeah.
can step away from having to be 100% on top of it
But
24
teenagers
7.
misbehave.
Yeah, exactly.
and,
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 and
and
teenage, that's the problem. Teenagers misbehave, and that's why the owner's there. You feel to be there all the time, because if you're not there, they misbehave. And how do you transition those teenagers into adults who behave responsibility if you're there and that? So you've really hit it there. And that's ultimately what culture is in the business. Culture is how do your team behave when you're not there. And when I talk to culture to CEOs about culture, they talk about, the snooker table. They talk about pizzas and beer on a Friday, and I go, no, that's not culture. That's perks. Give your staff perks. But let me ask you this: if your small child is misbehaving, do you give them an ice cream in the hope that the ice cream will improve their behavior, or is the ice cream likely to encourage poor behavior? And so when your staff are behaving poorly and you have a poor culture, and you give them the perks, you treat them well to try and improve the culture, it leads to entitlement, it leads to poor culture. So you have to cut straight to the issues. People are behaving poorly, and you have to fix that. I'm all in favor of perks. I look after my people really, really well because they are a great team. Uh, but I don't confuse insisting on a very good cultural place with the perks you give people. I think it's one of the mistakes I hear.
So let's dive into it then. What, from a cultural perspective, like obviously you talk to these CEOs and work with them. If you're sitting in a room right now and everybody listening to us is a 7, 8 figure CEO, which would be amazing,
Yeah,
what advice would you give? What advice would you give them about building culture? What are some of the things that mistakes you made or breakthroughs that you had in instilling this culture that I'm sure you will look back and say, this is what revolutionized my business. This is what took us from here to there.
um, a lot of CEOs, business owners, are overwhelmed because they don't run their business. Their business runs them, and that means that um, their staff, their people, and their customers dictate how they behave. They don't decide how they operate as a business. They let other people decide how they operate as a business. And if you let other people decide how you operate as a business, then that becomes very stressful for you because other people control you. And the biggest problem is tolerating poor behavior from people in a business, poor communications, lack of accountability, lack of responsibility. The biggest problem I see is tolerating poor behavior. And this, I mean, 90% of business owners, CEOs I speak to will say their biggest problem is people, and they will talk about the poor behavior of people in their business, what they do, what they don't do, uh, and it's all talking about them, the problem with the people. And really, if they're open to it, it depends on the nature of the conversation. The reality is you get what you tolerate from people. And at some stage, you have to stand up in front of your people and go, this is how we behave in the business. This is how we communicate with each other. This is the level of responsibility, accountability. This is the behavior we accept in the business. And at some point in time, you have to draw a line and say nothing else is acceptable. And so I had to do that in my business. And when I stood up and says nothing else, this is how we now behave in this business, the backbiting, the bitching, the not taking responsibility, not showing up fully, that's not going to be acceptable anymore. There were two really important things. One is I had to be 100% adamant that that was going to be the case. Because again, it's like with your children. If you tell them they can't do something, but they know you really don't mean it, then it continues. So you have to be willing to no longer tolerate poor behavior. And the second thing is you have to be willing to remove people from the business who go, I'm not playing that game. And that there will always be the case, people not playing that game. At one stage in my business, we a couple of things had gone wrong in the business. Some of them were my fault, by the way. And I looked at my management team and I realized that my management team weren't up to scratch, and I had to remove three people from a small management team. So and replace them with a much higher caliber people, much better cultural fit who connect with me and understand the cultural values I want in the business. And secondly, had the skills, the aptitude for the role as well. But what that demonstrated to the people in the business is that culture is non-negotiable in this business. How you behave, how you show up when you walk in the door is non-negotiable, and it doesn't matter who you are. And when you remove very senior, when you remove a star pay uh, person from the business because they behave um, poorly, because and every business owner will recognize, because they throw tantrums, because they make demands, because they're unreasonable, because nothing is their fault, because they blame somebody else. When you tolerate that behavior from someone, it spills through the rest of the business, and you will need to either change that person. Often it's very difficult, or you will need to have the courage to remove that person in the business. And that's the line. The biggest thing I had to overcome was the personal courage to go, I'm not tolerating this in my business anymore. And there are two choices: my way, where you operate within the culture I want in this business, or you leave. They are your choices. There's no middle ground. That is extremely difficult. That's why I'm saying this is not easy. I've done that, and mostly business owners will not have the personal courage to do that. They will not step up and go, Andres, this is how you behave now if you work for me. You have two choices. And I would love you to stay and work for me, but this is how you behave if you work here. If you choose not to behave that way, Well, that's great. There's lots of people that will have you, but it just won't be my business. And mostly a business owner needs to decide the standards in their business and be willing to lose the people. Now I can hear the responses coming from people listening. It's not that easy. I can't find good people. I can hear all those responses. And as long as you live in that space, that I tolerate that, you get the business. You get the business you tolerate. And when you have the courage to step out, that you create something different. Uh, it's it's difficult. I'm not saying it's not difficult. As I say, I created this mastermind program called the One Hour CEO, which we do over 6 months. And the reason we do it over 6 months is because you have to be with people along the journey. Because you can just give people platitudes and say, do this, do this. But then when they come against an obstacle, you have to walk people through that journey because it's a uh, difficult journey. But the hardest thing is for someone who runs a business to actually step up. And maybe I can explain this to try and wrap this piece up. But I was sitting in my office with a very senior manager many years ago. I thought we had the culture problem sorted out in the business. Comes in, he sits down, he starts talking about a culture problem in the business, and my heart sinks. I go, oh, I thought we fixed the culture. He's saying we have a culture problem. And so then I said to him, have we a culture problem in our accounts department? He goes, no, no, they're a great team. They're wonderful people. Oh, so it's not accounts? No. Have we a cultural problem in this business? No, they're great. They're all wonderful. But have we a cultural problem in this piece of it? No, they're all great. I'm going, okay, so let me clarify. We only have a cultural problem in this piece of the business. That's right, but there's a big cultural problem there. And I'm going, is Andreas a culture problem? No, he's great. He's great. Is Paul a culture? No, And then the penny dropped, and he said to me, "Oh, we don't have a cultural problem in the business. We've an individual problem." And I said, "That's it. You have a problem with one individual in the business." So most entrepreneurs, owners listening to this, when they step back and they look at it, they realize I have a problem with one individual, and I'm afraid to step up to that individual, to call them out, to tell them how they need to behave, and have the willingness to remove them if they don't. So in that situation, we change the dynamics right away within the conversation, and you realize I'm talking about a whole cultural problem. I don't have a cultural problem. I have a behavioral problem with one individual. I need to deal with that individual. It took us about 3 to 6 months. I wish I could tell you we sorted it out in 20 minutes because I would sound really clever. It didn't. It took us 3 to 6 months to remove that person from the business because in Ireland, that's not an easy thing to do. Maybe it's different in the US. We can't just fire people very easily. It took us a while. And we did it properly and we came to a proper arrangement with her. So we removed the person in the business and we put someone else in the business who's still with us, has done a phenomenal job, and the culture shift. So sometimes when you're honest about it, it's one individual that's causing the problem, and you have to remove that. You have to remove that individual. But that's
Yeah, and I
very,
think
very difficult.
yeah, of course. And I think you being able to find out that that's one individual is only possible because of all of the work you did to fix the original culture problem, which was the bigger business. Then you start to root out some of those lower hanging fruits or people that slip between the cracks. And
Yeah,
to double down on what you mentioned on like people, you can hear the people complaining, oh, it's not that easy. Oh, it's not, it's something that's hard. I personally think that the world rewards you with bringing people towards you if you're able to attract them with good habits, being a good person, fostering that good culture. The person complaining is the person that's not willing to step up and make a change in their business. And the reason they can't find those A players is because they lack the ability to actually root the problem out inside their company because they think it's going to be too hard. And unfortunately, that is typically the CEO, the entrepreneur that fails, that doesn't continue to build this business. And we'll use you as an example here. You built an 8-figure business, you built successful companies. That doesn't mean that you haven't had to change, pivot, flip, run backwards, run forward, mold and do all of this crazy stuff in between to get to the point now where you were able to step away from the business, where you were able to grow this massive enterprise. All of that was because you were willing to change, willing to look at yourself in the mirror and say, well, I need to do this, I need to do that. And unfortunately, most people fail at that aspect right there, fail at pushing themselves to do the things that are challenging, that aren't easy.
And so you brought it right back down to where I started with. Is that when we take people through this mastermind process, we start with clarity, personal vision, and business vision. People don't want to start with clarity. They want to go straight to strategy and execution. They want to go, no, how do I fix this? And you've nailed it. Unless you're willing to look in the mirror and go, fundamentally, when I hear CEOs complaining about a culture problem in the business, this, I know you are responsible for it because you've hired these people, you tolerate these people, and you haven't fired these people. You'd prefer to go for option four, which is I will blame these people. I've sat in the company of other business owners complaining about this and chosen not to engage because I could see they're just trapped in this cycle, because the willingness for any use. And that's why I would spend so much time with people. When you become extremely clear about what your personal drivers are, your personal values are, this is me, this describes Paul Ryan, this is how I approach life, this is everything that's important to me in life. And then you go back to your business and you go, this is interfering, this is messing up, this is causing me problems. Now you're in a much more powerful situation. You go, hold on a sec, I know now how to create, I know what my happiness formula is. I know what I need to do to live a fulfilled life. And this is interfering with that. Now it becomes, am I willing to sacrifice this life because of someone's behavior and because I don't have the courage to step up to them? Well, when you don't have clarity, the answer is of course, which is why most people drift through life, because they actually don't have clarity on what they want. When you become clear about what you want, if I gave you a rifle and said, hit the target, Andres, but I don't tell you where the target is, you're never going to hit it. If I show you the target and allow you to take aim and fire, you have a good chance of hitting it. If you miss and I go, Andres, you need to go slightly to the right, and you go again, you're eventually going to hit it. And once people understand what their unique personal drivers are, they have the target. This is the formula for my life. This is how my life works. I need to hit these targets. And it's life. I won't get it all right. I won't do it all right all the time. But because I know what the target is, I get to continually readjust and reassess. And I encourage people to do these periodic reviews through their lives, where they look through the lens and go back every couple of weeks and review a piece of their life. So they're constantly seeing, redefining, readjusting, because it's not linear. It's not one trick fix all. It is a way we live. But I agree with you that the most difficult parts. I had this conversation with someone a couple of months ago, and they asked me what was the biggest challenge in the journey, and I said personal courage. Me having the personal courage to look myself in the eye and realize I need to change these things, and I'm not changing them, and I'm not addressing them because I'm afraid of the consequences of addressing them. And that's a lack of personal courage. And the biggest shift for me was personal courage and going, do I want to live that way? Do I want to be this guy whose business is a mess, who's sitting in his heart with his heart pounding, thinks he's going to have a heart attack, whose business is a cultural mess, where his head is a mess? Or do I want to be the guy who has a business, who gets to do the stuff he loves all the time because he's a management team running his business? I want to be that guy? But there's a price to be paid for everything. And the price is personal courage, stepping up and then doing the hard work over a period of time. It's phenomenally rewarding, but it's not easy.
Yeah, and I think something as we just continue to talk that's interesting to me is most eight-figure CEOs over the last 30 years have been older, because you've traditionally had to be in the industry a while to get your company to that size. Now we live in this world where
Yeah.
22, 23-year-olds are spinning up eight-figure businesses in their bedroom, in a dorm room. And obviously, like, speaking with the 50 plus year old CEO is a lot different than talking to the 25-year-old CEO. A lot of our audience is on the younger side, building these businesses, starting these companies. You've obviously got tons of experience in this world. You've lived in this industry for years. What advice could you offer to them, the younger CEO? What information that you've gathered, and obviously we've talked a lot about it, but what is like a standout piece of advice that you could give to the younger entrepreneur that's listening right now and trying to make it?
For a moment, can I sound extraordinarily negative? And the
Yes.
extraordinarily negative thing is that when you start a business, you have a 95% chance of failure. Your audience don't want to hear that. The odds of you being here I presume it's the same in the States. I know in Europe, when you register a business, the odds of that business existing successfully in 5 years' time is you have 5% chance of existing in 5% in 5 years' time. You have 0.5, half a percent chance of being here in 10 years' time with a revenue in excess of 10 million euro. So it's an Olympic level sport you're getting into. Now, I don't say that to be negative. I say that so you are aware. If I handed you a Ferrari tomorrow and said, take it for a spin, you would be aware that you're driving a lethal machine. You would be careful, you would buckle up. But at 22 years of age, buckling up is not in your nature. So I would say speed kills. How many of those, I'm in my late 50s, how many of those entrepreneurs who are building successful businesses will have successful businesses in 5 years' time, in 10 years' time? A very small amount of them. I think it does come back to being very clear about what you want. If you just pursue a business, unless you're of a very unique nature, you will. If you just pursue business, you will probably end up miserable because we need other things in life. I think mentorship is very good, but be careful about the mentors you have. I've had so many mentors walk in my doors over the years, and most of them, because I hear them on YouTube and all over the place, are bullshitters. The only mentor worth his salt is a mentor who has walked the road, who has lived. So if you're 22 and you can get a mentor who's 20 or 30 years older than you, and I don't want someone who is a consultant. I want someone who has built the business you want to build, or has been in the field for many, many, many years. If they're retired and if they're a consultant, that's fine now. But I don't take financial advice from someone who's not financially sound. It makes no sense. So I think be aware it's a very dangerous sport. If you can get so slow down. You're in it for the long game. Making a lot of money and not having that lot of money when you're my age is not much fun. Most people will retire broke. These are the statistics. I know lots of people who are my age, close to retirement, and they are not retiring financially independent. Probably 98% of people aren't. Trust me, when you get to a stage where you have two things that are incredibly valuable, time freedom and financial freedom, it's a wonderful way to live your life. And if you need to dial it down a bit and slow down a bit, do it more cautiously, take some advice, take less risk. You need the risk to grow. You need to reduce risk to keep wealth. And the problem is we build our wealth by taking risk. But if we keep on taking risk, we will probably end up losing that wealth. But the stories in the media are only about the people who kept the wealth. They're not telling you the stories that people lost along the way. So maybe slow down a bit. And the last thing I would say is that I'm not extraordinarily wealthy. I'm not Elon Musk, but I live an extraordinary quality of life. And that extraordinary quality of life is I have time freedom and financial freedom. So I have the freedom to do what I want with my time. I don't have to get out of bed to make money in the morning. I can live for the rest of my life without doing that. So I get to do every day what I want to do. Some of that is working because I enjoy that, and some of that's not working, traveling, but I get the freedom to do that. That's an extraordinary quality of life in my books. You need a certain level of income to do that, but you don't need to be Elon Musk to do that. And most people reckon that you need to be extraordinarily wealthy to live that way, and you probably don't. So maybe pull back from going, I want to have 100 million, I want to 500 million. Who told you needed that? Maybe dial it back a bit and go, it's back to understanding your personal drivers. I know that if I have enough income to live my life with my family, my sons are growing up now, but to travel, spend time with my wife, nothing more precious to me than getting up on a Monday morning and knowing I can do whatever I want today. I don't have to work ever again for the rest of my life if I don't want. So figure out what you need to live an extraordinary quality of life. It's probably a fraction of what you're aiming for. By the way, I'm not saying don't aim for the stars, but create the quality of life first, and then when we have that boxed away, build for the stars. You know, a lot of people talk about 10xing your business. I'm more interested in 10xing my life. To be honest with you, 10xing my wealth is not going to 10x the quality of my life. Maybe young entrepreneurs don't want to hear that, but then I'm not a young entrepreneur, so
I mean, look, that's just the cold hard truth, and I really appreciate you
it's
being
my
an open
truth.
book
It's my
about it.
truth.
Yeah.
I only speak from my lived experience, nothing else. That's my lived experience. It's different to other people's lived experience, but that's my lived experience.
Yeah, and for people listening right now, like this is coming straight from somebody who is has lived it, has been a practitioner. And you
Yeah,
mentioned about the mentorship. I say this all the time because now we live in this era where everybody's got a course, everybody's got a
yeah.
mentorship, everybody's going to pay me for my time, pay this, pay that. If the person who is offering the mentorship is not a practitioner or not actively in the trenches preaching about what they're preaching, they are not legit. If it was the money opportunity, the big opportunity that they're teaching you about, they would be actively doing it. That is flag number one. Number
Big
two,
flag. Yeah.
do not take advice, do not seek advice from anybody that isn't where you want to be. Most people think like, oh, this guy's got 1 million Instagram followers, I should probably meet with him. Well, what is that person doing in their life? What have they achieved actually other than those 1 million followers? What are their goals? You need to actively, and I think that's one of the most important things when it comes to mentorship, because it's invaluable, but at the same time can be so derailing for entrepreneurs. Be very intentional about who you pick. Look at all of these external factors, not just the front page of how much money they make, what business they built. They have to be aligned with what
Mm.
you're aligned. If not, you won't see success in that mentorship.
How do you know? I remember many years ago, um, pulling into my driveway, and a neighbor of mine had an Aston Martin James Bond's car, and he also had a swimming pool. In Miami, that's probably not unusual, but that's an extraordinary thing to have in Ireland. And my young son, he's now 30 years of age, was said to me, "Wow, Dad, he's an Aston Martin and he's a swimming pool. He must be enormously wealthy." I said, son, you know two things about him now. You know, he drives an Aston Martin. You know, he has a swimming pool. Maybe he doesn't own that Aston Martin. Maybe he's paying an enormous loan in that Aston Martin. Maybe he can't afford to fill a swimming pool. So we have to be very careful about how people present themselves. Um, you know, I don't like to pay people for training or advice if they need my money. I'm in the wonderful position that if someone wants to pay me for my mentorship or to join my mastermind or something, I do not need their money. I do not need them. So the wonderful thing about that is that I will only work with someone where I feel it's a genuine connection, and I can help them, because they cannot pay me an amount of money that's going to change my extraordinary life. Not saying I don't like money, but it's not going to there's nothing in my life I'm going to have because of the check they give me, and nothing I'm not going to have because of the check. I don't need their money. And if you can find someone that really doesn't need your money, um, but is genuinely going to give you valuable guidance and mentorship, how do you find it? That's extraordinarily difficult. But I think what you said is right. You got to be careful of looking for people who front it all. And we all know this social media people who hire the private plane in a Lamborghini for an hour so they can take photographs. Most wealthy people I know, and I know a lot of business owners, have very little interest in impressing you. They've very little interest in showing you the fancy car, the fancy house. Why? Because I mean, why would they care? I mean, why do I need to impress you? It makes no difference to my life. I don't. But when people want something from you, they want to impress you, so you will buy something from them. And if someone needs your money, then what have they got to teach you? So yeah, that's the young entrepreneur. It's a fine line. You got to be very, very careful with that. Very careful.
Yeah, thank you so much. And we're coming here to the end of our conversation, and this question I asked to all of my guests, I think will hit home for the younger entrepreneur again. And for you, Paul, if you could go back and talk to 18-year-old Paul, what would be that one piece of advice that you would tell yourself that you think would change the trajectory of your life? And obviously, you've had a really good one. So,
Uh,
not.
the, well, I don't know if it changed the directory of my life, but it would have made it easier and got me here sooner. And it's almost contrary to what we've been saying. The advice I would have given myself was to believe in myself, because when I was 18, I believed a lot of things. I was very ambitious, and we talked about personal courage. And most of the big challenges I came up against were when I didn't believe in myself. I let other people tell me what my value was. I let other people put me down, or I just didn't step up to be me. So, what would have made my life simpler and got me a level of peace of mind and fulfillment sooner was to reach that pace of inner peace where I go, just believe in myself. I am what I am, and this is a good place to be. Uh, Even before you have achieved all the things you want to achieve, you can still connect and believe with yourself. And I mean at a deep level. I don't mean at a fronting level and pretense. I mean at an honest inner level where you look inside and you feel you connected with what you feel inside, and self-love and all of these things. So I would have believed in myself. But then maybe it also takes time and the decades of experience. Maybe you earn that belief also.
Thank you so much. I want to make sure anybody that's still with us now that wants to connect with you about anything that we've talked about today, maybe feels they're a potential fit for the 1 Hour CEO program, or is interested in maybe being a guest on the Inner Entrepreneur podcast,
Sure.
what is the best place for them to go and reach you?
You will find me on LinkedIn. If you look at Paul Ryan, and the company is Temple, Temple, or you'll find me on Twitter at Paul Ryan Writes. So you'll find me in either of those places, and if you DM me, I'm sure I will see it eventually.
Awesome. Paul, thank you so much for coming on the show and giving this unfiltered advice on what it has taken you to build these 8 figure businesses, but also at the same time have a very successful and fulfilling life, which I think should be and is the goal for most people listening. Um, I appreciate you coming on here and just sharing this with our community, the younger entrepreneurs, the next generation of founders. I really appreciated this conversation. I feel like I got smarter, I got better, and I can go into my businesses and now be a better founder operator. And I'm sure so many people listening and following with us right now have too. So I do want to say thank you so much for the time, and I can't wait to